welcome to Listening Librarians. My name is Katie, and I am here with Jennifer. And today we are going to be discussing science fiction audiobooks that we have been listening to recently. And that is because you found out that January is Science Fiction Month?
Yeah, or there's a science fiction day in it. I don't remember which, but why not? Let's start the new year with some sci-fi.
Exactly. Now, you and I were discussing this earlier today.
Yeah.
What actually constitutes science fiction in your mind?
It feels like it's kind of a bit broader than, it's not just Star Wars, Star Trek kind of stuff.
Doesn't have to be outer space, but futuristic.
One of the best descriptions I've seen, especially in how do you distinguish between science fiction and fantasy, is the mechanism or the plot device by which you can make things happen. So with sci-fi, it would be technology. In fantasy, it's magic. And that's a very, very simplistic way of looking at it.
I like that, though.
But yeah, so that would cover space travel, time travel, robots, computers, advanced science, things like that. And it tends to, I think, usually be a more realistic world setting. So something more what we're used to in real life.
Less fictional, magical creatures and whatnot. Yeah.
Unless it's really futuristic and you get aliens.
And then just aliens.
All bets are off.
This is a great definition. Well, I'm going to kick us off with a book I really enjoyed. It's called The Paradox Hotel, and it was by Rob Hart. Now, this book came out just last year in 2022, and it's about 11 hours long. Now, it was read by the incomparable Emily Wu Zeller.
Yeah.
And, I hear that name all of the time. So I actually clicked on her name within Libby. And on Libby, she had over 200 audiobooks to her name.
She is prolific. Yeah.
Yes. So she's always fantastic. Now, this book centers around January Cole. She's our main character. And she is the head of security at this ultra swanky hotel that caters to these wealthy tourists because you can time travel through this hotel.
Oh,
and there's only a couple of these hotels across the world, and they're all run by the U.S. government because they're the ones who came up with the technology.
Of course.
So part of her job is normal security, like you would in any other hotel. But then the other part is also making sure that when these tourists go back in time, that they are not messing up the timeline too much. Now, they have found, because this has been going on for a couple of decades, they found that the timeline usually fixes itself. But, for example, they're not allowed to bring things back. You're not allowed to try and kill Hitler as much as you would maybe want to, that kind of thing. So when things go awry, she has to go back with her team and fix things.
Okay.
So she's been doing this for so long and traveling in the time stream that she actually has a time stream sickness. It happens to people who've done it so much. So that's kind of how the book starts, with her dealing with the fact that she'll just randomly blank out. And suddenly, she'll look like she's sitting there, but her mind is transported into the past, or even sometimes the future. She'll get these future blips. So she'll be walking down the hallway and she'll see someone who died years ago, or she'll be walking down the hallway and she'll see, she actually does in fact see the body of one of their current guests, and she freaks out, only it hasn't happened yet. So can she stop it? So all of this is going on. And on top of that, the U.S. government has realized that it's hemorrhaging money through this hotel. Mm-hmm. So they've brought in the wealthiest of the wealthy who all want to buy the hotel for whatever purpose. So that's kind of how we come into this book. She's got this time illness where she sometimes spaces out and doesn't know what's going on. These wealthy people are here and they all want this technology for various reasons. And then, on top of it, we have our run-of-the-mill tourists who go back in time and bring velociraptor eggs back. There are dinosaurs in this book. So it was just really interesting. And it kind of the book really gets its start when she does, like I mentioned, she sees one of their current guests, one of those ultra trillionaires who's potentially going to buy the hotel. She sees his dead body, but he has not actually died yet. So she has seen a blip of the future. So she's got to figure out what is going on, who is planning to hurt these people, because not only has she seen that, but now these little accidents keep happening to these wealthy people too. So that's the kind of the mystery that you have to help solve as the reader with her. As I mentioned, this was really interesting. The plot does get a little complicated, so it was one of those audiobooks that I had to pay like extra attention to. But it's fun and it's dark and it's smart and definitely very unique.
I like the sound of that. I think I'm going to have to check that out. Well, I always enjoy our back and forth with books because it's like, okay, so how do I jump from your book to my book? I got the hook this time.
Okay.
So, wealthy people wanting technology.
Okay.
All right. So, my first book is going to be Version 0 by David Yoon. And like yours, this came out in 2022. Our main character is a guy by the name of Max, who is a product developer for the social media company Ren.
Okay.
Spelled W-R-E-N.
Like the bird.
Yeah. So you can kind of see what that's being compared to. Yeah, there's an awful lot of way things are named. It's like, oh, was the author trying to imply this or this? So you got that to look forward to. Max discovers some information that the NSA, the National Security Agency, and the CIA, and some other kind of shady organizations want to pay for their user data. And he's like, I don't know, that sounds kind of sketchy ethically. So he goes to his boss about it because his boss is, Mr. Laid Back and we're all a team here and that kind of thing. So he invites Max in and tell me what the issue is. And that sounds like a really big deal. Next thing you know, Max is fired.
Ooh, and no one likes a whistleblower.
And then he's blackballed from other tech companies.
Oh.
So Max is not too happy. Max meets up with his friend / crush, Akiko, and they decide they're going to break the internet. They somehow hack into, whether it's Ren or one of the other platforms, erase the likes off of people's posts, and then get out there and make a statement to tell people that their information has been sold, and to try and get people to abandon these social media platforms. Basically, they turn into, you could call them a techno-terrorist group.
Okay.
I mean, they're not blowing things up, but they're hacking. They're trying to
It would technically be illegal.
Correct. Calling themselves Version 0 because they're trying to reset things before version 1.0 or whatever.
Okay.
And along the way, it's these two plus Akiko's boyfriend. And they somehow come to the attention of this really famous but totally reclusive tech guy who decides he wants to get in on it too. And I'm just going to leave it there because once this guy gets involved, things start to snowball and then get really wild.
Okay.
Yeah. This one is just under 11 hours, and it's read by Kevin R. Free, who we've come across before with Murderbot and some of the other books we've read. Great narrator, a lot of fun to listen to, but sometimes you just kind of catch yourself going, wait a minute, what? What did he just say? So this is a good one to get you thinking about the impact of social media in our lives and how some people might want to change that.
Privacy
for
laws.
good, for ill.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah, it was a lot more interesting than I had expected.
Okay.
So,
So I am going to change paces a little bit,
Cool.
and I'm going to talk about The Q by Amy Tintera. This also came out in 2022, and it takes place in, they don't say, but based on data, approximately the 2060s, I think. So COVID has come and gone. And they mentioned that this is now about 20 years after COVID, which would be the 2040s. There is another major pandemic. And only this time the United States has their act together, and they go, okay, anyone who's sick, and patient zero for the US was in Austin, Texas. So they essentially make this quarantine bubble around Austin, Texas. And I'm talking hard quarantine. Walls, National Guard with guns. They're going to shoot anybody who comes over the side. Okay, so that was 20 years ago. So it's 20 years after that, so approximately in the 2060s. And the Q, formerly Austin, Texas, is now like its own country. Because it's been going on for so long, because this virus keeps mutating, and it's got like a 70% mortality rate. It's causing like major organ failure. So the science in the Q has at least progressed enough that they're very good at like growing artificial organs. And so that's kind of the setting. Now, our two lead characters are Maisie Rojas, who is narrated by Kyla Garcia, and then Lennon Pierce, who is narrated by Robbie Daymond. And Maisie has grown up in the Q. She's actually considered one of the first 5, which was the children born in the Q within the first 5 years of its existence. And so it's the only life she's ever known. And she is the daughter of one of the families, you might think maybe slightly mafia or gang family, that runs Southern Austin. So Austin itself in all these years has kind of schismed. There's people who kind of control the north, and then her family controls the south. And so she's the daughter of like one of their lead enforcers. And then Lennon Pierce, our other lead character, he is from Virginia, so obviously outside the Q, and his dad is running for president. The election is in about a month, and it looks like for the first time, his opposition, who has been president since the Q was created, might actually lose to Lennon's dad. So they kidnap Lennon, put him in an airplane with a parachute over the dead center of the Q, and just drop him out of the plane. And I guess in the hopes that that would distract his dad from getting votes. I would think it's going to get him sympathy votes.
You would think, yeah.
So since the science is advanced enough in the Q, they are able to give him something so the virus won't take hold for about 72 hours. And the CDC says, if you can get him out in 72 hours, we'll take him back. So Maisie actually sees him fall from the sky. And so she kind of takes it under her wing. I'm going to get him out of the Q. But that involves going through the north. There's some infighting amongst her family as well, because some of them want to keep Lennon, because the thought is, well, the United States would never hurt us if we've got the potential president's kid.
Right.
So it's a lot of like action-packed adventure for like the second half of the book as they get through desert, because it's Texas, and all these people. She wants him to get out because she wants him to tell the world what the Q is actually like, that they're just humans. And because he comes in with all these rumors that, of course, it's kind of humorous in the book, that they've all become cannibals, that they've are living off the grid, but they've got, solar panels. They've figured all the science things out. So they're living pretty normal lives. They're just stuck in what would be Austin, Texas. Right. So it was a great read to dive into, very quick, and fantastic chemistry between Lennon and Maisie as well. So I really enjoyed finishing 2022 reading that book. or listening to it in this case.
Okay. Well, we'll go from fast-paced to much, much, much slower paced with my next one, which is actually a pair of novellas.
Okay.
And this would be the Monk and Robot series by Becky Chambers. The first one is a psalm for the wild-built.
Mm-hmm.
The second one is a prayer for the crown-shy. I don't know if there will be others coming out. But these two fall under what is sometimes called cozy sci-fi or cozy punk. It's not a lot of action.
Okay.
It's much more character growth, and in this case, some very philosophical discussions between our main character, sibling Dex, who is a non-binary tea monk.
Okay.
Traveling around in their caravan and, stopping to serve tea to people. It's a whole thing. I won't go into explaining what tea monks do and their whole ritual, but you had me at tea monk. So.
Yeah, it sounds like a great job.
Yeah. And sibling Dex is feeling that life angst that so many people can relate to.
Mm-hmm.
What is my purpose? Why am I doing this? Is it going to be the same thing day in, day out from the rest of my life? Is there something more? And decides that they are going to head up to the mountains where there's a temple, maybe spend some time in contemplation, figure out where they want to go with life from there. And this is in a society where approximately 1,000 years before, it had been a society where robots were pretty prolific, did a lot of the work for humans, but about 1,000 years before, the robots somehow awakened, became self-aware, and decided they didn't want to essentially be enslaved to humans anymore.
Okay.
And made a deal with the humans that, we are going to go away. We're not going to take part in human society anymore. We're not going to fight you.
Okay, so not Terminator.
No, this is not a war situation. We're not going to take you out. No, it's just we're going to go our separate ways. And, maybe in 1,000 years ago, we'll come back and check on you and, see if there's anything we can help with, but we need our autonomy. So that's kind of the framework for all of this. And the sibling Dex's society does have some tech. I mean, they have like handheld devices, kind of like we have smartphones. It's not the same thing, but they have some tech. It's just they don't have robots. So as sibling Dex is traveling out into the countryside, one night they've set up camp. They hear a noise in the woods and think, oh, is it a bear? Is it a wild animal? No, it is not. It is a wild robot who goes by the name of Splendid Speckled Mosscap.
That is the best name ever.
Yes. Or Mosscap for short.
Okay.
And I call it a wild robot because, once the robots have left human society, they don't necessarily have the pieces parts to be able to make more. Okay. So the newer robots are built from the old ones, but then natural parts. So they're kind of like part bionic, part organic.
Okay. That's cool.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But Mosscap just kind of bounds up and is like, well, hello. And Mosscap is very artless and enthusiastic and wanting to get to know sibling Dex and what can I do for you? And, we've always had these legends that at some point robots would go back and ask humans, what do they need? And so I'm the first one and I am here to ask you, what do humans need?
He sounds adorable.
He is adorable. Oh my goodness. And of course, sibling Dex is just, what do I do? But the two of them end up having this little road trip together and get to know each other and understand where each other is coming from. And it's a way to kind of bring these two groups back together again in some small limited form.
Okay.
So that's the first novella. And the second novella is they're going from the temple back to different villages where then other people can meet Moss Cap and get to see the robots again because they've never seen one in their lifetime.
Generations later.
Yeah, and so there's a lot of philosophical discussions along the way about our purpose, what life is meant to be about, things like that. It's very soothing. Yeah. And each one is only about 4 hours long. They're both They are both read by M. Grossland, who does an absolutely wonderful job, especially in voicing Moss Cap with that very bright and cheery and inquisitive sort of voice where everything is a wonder. And it's just such a delight to listen to and be able to think about your own life as well and to find what is good and meaningful.
Oh, it sounds
in your
lovely.
Existence. So yeah, that's a nice picker-upper, I think.
Well, that was all I had to talk about.
Yeah, that covers it for me. I know I tried one or two others, but I didn't want to go overboard to start the year, as I sometimes do.
Well, what do we have coming up in February?
Well, February, because it tends to be a cold, snowy, dreary sort of month, we thought maybe we would get away from it all and talk travel.
Yes.
So, don't know yet if that's going to be travel memoirs, travel outside the galaxy. Who knows?
Just a book that takes place in a country or a state that you'd rather be in than Ohio in February.
Exactly.
So we will see you in February for the next edition of Listening Librarians. Thank you for joining us for this edition.
Yes. And Happy New Year.
Bye-bye.
Bye.